This is the story of how an E11A crashed in Afghanistan. Now, for those of you that don't know, the E11A is the military version of the Bombardier Global 6000. The plane is packed to the gills with communication infrastructure, and it plays a supporting role in most conflicts. On the 27th of January 2020, the plane was over Afghanistan playing a supporting role in Operation Freedom Sentinel, which is what came after Enduring Freedom. Say what you will about the US military, they do know how to name stuff. But before we go ahead with this video, let me talk about this video sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is the game with the best characters, the best story, and the best arcs. If you want to battle it out in a war that's been raging for thousands of years, Raid is for you. With more than 10 warring factions, you can't go wrong with Raid. And guess what? Ever since the game debuted, the Death Knight has been a fan favorite, and now he's getting a huge, great upgrade. Well, he's being replaced by himself. It's finally his day in the sun. He increases your team's defense by 30% by just being there. You want to know what's even better? You can get him right now for free. Just log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and October the 27th. You can use the promo code DKRises for free things in the game so you can level up as fast as possible. There's never been a better time to get started. Use my link or scan the QR code right here and get a free starter pack worth almost $30. You can get a free champion Vergis and this cool in-game loot. You can find these rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. Again, thank you to Raid for sponsoring this video. On the 27th of January 2020, the plane took off from Bagram Air Force Base at 11:05 a.m. The crew then proceeded to climb to their cruising altitude. The plane then just entered an orbit just west of Kabul at 42,000 feet. This should be an easy mission. Just stay there and relay data and then come home. But the mission would be anything but that. At 12:50 p.m., the pilots asked for clearance to the controller to climb from 42,000 feet to 43,000 feet. The engine spun up and the plane started to slowly climb from 42,000 feet. Then an explosion rocked the engine. One of the engines had just exploded and the crew were down to one of their engines. On the cockpit voice recorder, a loud bang could be heard, and then the voice recorder data just cut out. The plane was shaking violently to the point where the crew thought that they had collided with another plane or something. The plane yawed to the left and the pilots fought to correct it. Within a few minutes, the E11A had lost more than 1,000 feet in altitude. At 12:51 p.m., the plane was at 41,000 feet, down from its peak of 42,300 feet. In the cockpit, the pilots were figuring out how to get the plane under control. They pulled back the right-hand engine to idle to make sure that the engine that was damaged did not damage it even more. Seconds after that, they turned off the engine altogether. To help slow their fall, the left-hand engine was then increased in power. But to the confusion of the crew, the plane did not stabilize. The vibrations eased up for a bit, but then they were right back where they started. Much to the concern of the crew, they watched as the left-hand engine now gave up on them as well. The needle on the console rolled back, indicating that the left-hand engine had died. This crew was now left without power. Both their engines had failed. Now they needed to get this plane on the ground as fast as possible. On the display, a large warning appeared, dual engine out. The pilots immediately got on the radio with Kabul ATC and let them know that they had lost both engines. The crew then started on the dual engine out checklist to prep the plane for a potential restart of the engines. The pilots were going for something known as a windmill restart. Right now the plane was flying fast enough that the airflow would keep the core of the engine spinning. Getting the engine started right now would be a lot simpler when compared to something like starting it when the plane was much slower. The pilots were aiming for Kandahar Airport, which was well outside the glide capabilities of the E11A in the configuration that it was in. And the pilots knew that, but they were absolutely sure that they could get at least one of their engines back online. But time was not on their side. From 30,000 feet, they could stay in the air for a grand total of 12 minutes. If they couldn't get their engines going in that time, then they were looking at landing somewhere in the harsh Afghani desert. But unluckily for the pilots of the E11A, the engines would not light. They now had to put this plane on the ground somewhere. The thing is, when the emergency started, they could have easily made it to Kabul or one of the forward operating bases, like Shank, but not anymore. Then, at 1:09 p.m., the plane impacted the ground, killing both pilots. As soon as the plane crashed, the emergency locator went off, and A-10s in the area were rerouted to find the wreck of the plane. Unfortunately, due to the weather and the area, recovery efforts could not be started immediately. With the investigators having to wait a bit before they got their hands on the wreck of the plane, they had to study what the pilots did. For some reason, air crews in the region were hesitant to divert to other airports, and instead always tried to make it to Kandahar. Well, why was this? Before that question could be answered, the wreck of the plane gave them a clue. The right-hand engine of the plane was fine. The left-hand engine, on the other hand, lost a blade, causing it to shut down. The pilots had shut down the wrong engine. This plane only had one engine that was in perfect working condition, and that was the right-hand engine, the engine that the pilots shut down. The sad thing is, they never found out that they had done that. The interesting thing about this crash was that the plane had gone down in hostile territory, so they really couldn't do all the testing that they wanted to do. They wanted to run tests on the fuel, the hydraulics, all of that stuff, but they had to make do with limited testing. They were able to ascertain that the fan blade on the left-hand engine separated, sending the entire engine into an unbalanced condition. Yeah, there was no way that this engine would be able to restart, because the computers would not allow the engine to restart because it was just way too damaged. The inspection and data from the flight data recorder all confirmed what they had found initially, that the right-hand engine was fine. There wasn't a thing wrong with that engine. Had they not shut it off, they would have definitely been able to make it back to the airport with no issues. But how could such an experienced crew make such a simple mistake, like getting left from right confused? It just does not make sense. Throughout this investigation, the investigators had been comparing the accident flight with another civilian crew who had an engine failure, like the one the military crew experienced. Now, it is to be noted that the civilian crew that had an engine failure experienced one that was much milder than the one experienced by the Air Force crew. But even in better circumstances, the civilian crew told investigators that the noise and vibrations made it hard for them to piece together what was going on. The crew of the plane over Afghanistan would have had it even worse since their failure was much more severe. But then, that severity is might of what doomed them. You see, in the crash of the E11A, the vibrations would have been so bad that it might have given the pilots a sense of emergency. That sense of emergency might have led them to make mistakes. In the case of the civilian crew, it took them a good 2 minutes to go through all the warning signs and shut down the correct engine. In the case of the crew of the E11A, that number was down to just 24 seconds. Yeah, there was only 24 seconds between the explosion and the shutdown of the wrong engine. Investigators think that a startle factor might have made the crew make the wrong decision in the small time that they had. I mean, look at this image. All of these are the warning messages that the pilots would have been given by the computers, and they were probably looking at this in a cockpit that was violently shaking. I can see how they might have thought that the wrong engine was the one in trouble. This accident would have been easily avoided if the crew had just diverted to one of the multiple airports nearby. That would have definitely saved them. The report says that this crew is just overconfident. Let me know in the comments if you think that that statement is true. This accident ultimately comes down to the pilots mismanaging the emergency, as sad as that sounds. They had a working engine, they just didn't know it, which is very, very sad. Once they were in the mess that they were in, they were pretty much on their own. Their training for the E11A taught them about how to deal with a single engine emergency, but not how to deal with a dual engine emergency. It just goes to show you that sometimes you just need to take it slow and let cooler heads prevail. But in the crew's defense, talking to the crew of the civilian plane that had a very similar problem, they said that it was very disorienting and they had a hard time keeping calm and getting through the checklist. The pilots of the accident flight had a much worse time. The severity of the situation might have given them a false sense of emergency that may have made the pilots make mistakes. Let me know what you think of this crash in the comments below. If you want to watch another video like this one but with a passenger jet, then I've made a video about the Kegworth disaster. You'll want to check it out with a link on your screen right now. Thank you for watching this episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. I will catch you guys next time. Stay safe.